Fluid mosaic model. Fluid mosaic model is proposed by Singer and Nicholson in 1972. It is an ingenious explanation of the molecular architecture and functional properties of plasma membrane. According to it, plasma membrane is a two-dimensional quasified solution of organized lipids and globular proteins. 1972 സിംഗർ ആൻഡ് നിക്കോൾസൺ പ്രപ്പോസ് ചെയ്ത പ്ലാസ്മ മെംബ്രെയിൻ്റെ സ്ട്രക്ചറാണ് ഫ്ലൂയിഡ് മൊസൈക്ക് മോഡൽ. ഫ്ലൂയിഡ് മൊസൈക്ക് മോഡൽ എന്ന് പറയാൻ കാരണം പ്ലാസ്മ മെംബ്രെയിൻ ഒരു സെമി ഫ്ലൂയിഡ് കൺസിസ്റ്റൻസിയാണുള്ളത്. ഫ്ലൂയിഡ് എന്ന് പറയാനുള്ള കാരണം the individual phospholipid and protein molecules move around within their layer. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അതിൽ ഫ്ലൂയിഡ് മൊസൈക്ക് മോഡൽ എന്ന് പറയാനുള്ള കാരണം. സ്ട്രക്ചർ ഓഫ് മെംബ്രെയിൻ എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ ദ ഫോസ്ഫോലിപ്പിഡ് ബൈലെയർ ഈസ് വിസിബിൾ യൂസിങ് ദ ഇലക്ട്രോൺ മൈക്രോസ്കോപ്പ്. 7 nanometer is wide and the major components of the plasma membrane is proteins, lipids and carbohydrates. കാർബോഹൈഡ്രേറ്റ് ഉള്ളത് ലോ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ക്വാണ്ടിറ്റിയിലാണ്. മെയിനായിട്ട് പ്രോട്ടീൻസ് ആണുള്ളത്. Features of fluid mosaic model. A plasma membrane is a dynamic structure existing in a liquid crystalline or quasified state with mosaic molecular arrangement and free molecular movement. The fluidity of the membrane is directly proportional to the chain length and unsaturation of its fatty acid. Major components of the membrane are held together through non-covalent interaction. The cohesive force between lipids and also between lipids and proteins are weak hydrophobic interaction. That is ionic bonds, hydrogen bonds, etc. Membrane lipids and protein undergo free lateral diffusion. Vertical diffusion of proteins and lipids from one side to other is very much restricted. Membrane phospholipid are arranged in a bilayer that serves as a structure framework, as a permeable barrier, and also as a solvent for integral membrane proteins. Phospholipid bilayer. According to the Singer-Nicholson concept, phospholipid molecules have a continuous arrangement. They are arranged side by side and back to back in two parallel rows, forming a continuous lipid layer or bimolecular lipid layer. This lipid bilayer forms the structural framework of the membrane. Its outer monolayer is formed mostly of acidic phospholipids, and the inner one consists mostly of neutral phospholipids. The phospholipid molecules are oriented in such a way that their polar heads are directed outward to the aqueous phase, and nonpolar fatty acids are directly inward to form the non-aqueous central one. This peculiar arrangement enables maximum interaction between polar heads and water molecules. The two lipid monolayer remain linked with each other by their fatty acid tails through hydrophobic interaction forces. The membrane phospholipids are in a mobile fluid state, free to diffuse laterally within the membrane. The phospholipid bilayer is essentially a film of oil, and it makes the membrane semi-fluid. This fluidity in turn is directly related to the concentration of unsaturated fatty acids. The length of fatty acid chains, the degree of molecular movement and stability of hydrophobic interactions. Very often cholesterol occurs tightly bound with phospholipids. This cholesterol phospholipid complex makes the membrane stable and highly impermeable to several polar substances. It also determines some of the functional properties of the membrane. Cholesterol lines up between the phospholipid molecules with its long axis lying parallel to the fatty acid chains of the phospholipids. In this position, it interferes with the tight packing of the fatty acids, keeps the lipid layer at low temperature, reduces the flexibility and permeability of the membrane, and keeps membrane in a moral gel state. Membrane proteins are mostly globular, without orderly or symmetrical arrangement. They are randomly dispersed and discontinuous. They remain partially or completely inside or outside their lipid layer. Those proteins which are completely outside the lipid layer are known as extrinsic or peripheral proteins, and those which penetrate the lipid bilayer are called intrinsic or integral proteins. Integral proteins Integral proteins span the entire lipid bilayer. They are called transpermeable proteins. They are alpha helix proteins. They form pores through the membrane and also transmit signals from one surface of the membrane to the another. Intrinsic proteins usually float and freely move about within the lipid matrix, just as icebergs float and drift in the open sea. Their lateral movement often result in the aggregation of functional proteins. The dispersed distribution of proteins forms the mosaic part of the fluid mosaic model. Extrinsic proteins are hydrophilic. They bind with the membrane surface by electrostatic interaction and hydrogen bonding. On the other hand, most intrinsic proteins are amphipathic. Their hydrophobic portion resides within the lipid bilayer, and the hydrophilic part projects out of the lipid bilayer. The hydrophobic portion may link with lipid molecules through hydrophobic interaction, such as ionic bonds and hydrogen bonds. Ah, Roles of components of cell membrane. Phospholipids it forms bilayer, act as a barrier to most water soluble substance. Cholesterol have hydrophilic heads and hydrophobic tails, regulate the fluidity of the membrane, preventing it from becoming too fluid, important for the mechanical stability of the membrane. Proteins are മൂന്ന് തരത്തിലുണ്ട്. Transport proteins, enzymes, proteins in membranes of organelles. Transport proteins എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ provide hydrophilic channels for ion and polar molecules to pass through the membrane. Enzymes catalyze the hydrolysis of molecules such as disaccharides. Proteins in membranes of organelles such as mitochondria and chloroplasts involved in the process of respiration and photosynthesis. Glycolipids, proteins and lipid molecules with a short carbohydrate chains form hydrogen bonds with the water molecules and so help to stabilize the membrane structure. Act as receptor molecules binding with hormones or neurotransmitters. This is these are the main important parts of the fluid mosaic model of plasma membrane, which is proposed by Singer and Nicholson in 1972. Thank you.